What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here with Cheesehead TV, here for your Packers Daily Chat after the dramatic comeback victory by the Green Bay Packers over the hated rival Chicago Bears. Aaron Rodgers putting the team on his back dough. Holy cow, what a game. I'm still buzzing. I don't know if you can tell, I'm still buzzing. So I thought I'd jump on Facebook as I am wont to do and say hi to you fine folks and see what's on your minds, see what's on the minds of Packers fans worldwide. We've had an incredible response since starting Packers Daily a little over a week ago. Let's keep it going. A lot of you chimed in last night after the game talking about Randall Cobb and Geronimo Allison and Devontae Adams. What a trio of wide receivers, each getting into the end zone last night. Really showing off the weaponry Aaron Rodgers has at his disposal, and he needed it. I think the yards after the catch were pretty impressive. Hard to look at that output without much of a contribution from Jimmy Graham and not be excited for the future. Kyle says Aaron Rodgers is not human. Kyle, I tend to agree. Where was Mercedes Lewis last night? He was used sparingly. I don't think they used a whole lot of two tight end stuff. I think they will, incorporate him more as the year goes on. But, as I said in the lead up to the game, Mike McCarthy is never one to give his tackles a lot of help, and that stayed true last night. They got a few chips from the backs, a couple of chips from the tight end, usually Jimmy Graham. But, the idea of putting Lewis out there to help with Mac never really manifested itself, and that is how McCarthy operates. Matt, still reeling. I hear you, man. Yeah, I was saying I'm still buzzing from it. That's one of those games that you are going to remember for the rest of your life, whichever side you were on. If you were a Bears fan, you're a Packers fan, even a casual fan, everyone is going to remember that game. Everybody who watched, whether you were there, whether you're watching on television, no matter who you are, if you watch that game, you are going to remember it forever. Those are pretty special moments, and we all got to witness it. More Bears fans than I've ever seen at Lambeau. I don't know about that, Matt. They've been pretty steadily representing the last few years. I don't know how often you get up to Lambeau these days, but the local teams especially, Minnesota and Chicago, their fans represent pretty well when those games are played at Lambeau. Will Trevor Davis get waived injured? Bo, TBD. We'll see. McCarthy was really cagey when asked about it. Tom Silverstein asked him about Trevor Davis being injured basically right before the game, and said they put him out on Lambeau Field and tried to get him, kind of a solo workout there. He couldn't really get it to go, so they shut him down due to a hamstring injury. Of course, he wouldn't say how it happened, but waived injured is definitely a possibility. Is Jari Evans still available to play? Yes, he's still available. He's still a free agent. I don't think the Packers make that call quite yet, although that is a possibility. I wouldn't be surprised if they made it, but I tend to think they're going to give Justin McCray one more week, at least, before they try and make a move there. And here's the thing. I thought, obviously, McCray had the two penalties early in the game, really shot themselves in the foot in that regard, but I thought he settled down really nicely as the game went on. A lot of people were talking about him because of those penalties throughout the game and then into this morning, but if you go back, I watched the game over twice today, once this morning, once this afternoon. And like I said, I thought he settled in really nicely as the game went on. Now, obviously those penalties were drive killers, and you can't have those. But, for the most part, I think a lot of the offensive problems early on, one, kind of the game plan. Yes, McCarthy calling some long developing stuff and Rodgers holding onto the ball a little bit too long in some cases. But I think more than anything, that first half was really their preseason. That was the first time the offense had worked together for an extended time at all, not even in camp, because you have so much mixing and matching going on. And then obviously they didn't play together at all during the preseason, save for one series. So that first half was very much the preseason for the Packers. So you saw what happened in the second half when they went to the pistol, they went to the quick hitting stuff, Rodgers getting the ball out of his hand, a bunch of touchdowns, a bunch of scoring drives. That's what you like to see. I thought Bulaga looked great. Kyle, I think for a guy who was coming off a major injury, didn't play at all save for two drives, I think it was, in that final preseason game, and going up against a premier pass rusher like Khalil Mack, I thought he acquitted himself quite well. Clearly, he has some issues early on, but I think that was to be expected just because of the rust factor. But as the game went on, I thought he got stronger, and I thought by the end of it, he was really holding up his end of the bargain, so to speak. Do you think we should have kept Ripkowski for his blocking? No, Chris, I don't. I think if they were going to have anybody back there, it would have been Joe Carriage. But Ripkowski's play never really was up to snuff, especially last year. Have I heard anything else on Rodgers' injury? No, I have not. And of course, McCarthy was not forthcoming other than to say that they are doing more tests and gathering information. Now, my guess would be that they are going to keep this as open as possible up until Friday or so, just to ensure that the Vikings have to game plan for DeShone Kizer. Not that will take a whole lot of firepower in Mike Zimmer's regard, but the more you have to make them prepare for different things, the better it is. You want to spread them as thin as you can. So I don't doubt McCarthy and company will keep up the charade, if it is a charade, as long as they can to try and make the Vikings prepare for 2 quarterbacks. Matt asks if Lindsey got tossed around pretty good last night. I didn't see that. I saw your tweet earlier. I went back and watched him specifically. There were 1 or 2 plays where he definitely got out leveraged. The screen play obviously was a rough one, although I can't put that entirely on him. He's trying to get out for the screen. But for the most part, I thought he held up pretty well. Now, where he and the 2 guards I think struggled the most was trying to get any kind of movement in any of those interior runs. They had a trap play that sprung. They had a couple of counters that worked, but for the most part, everything they tried to do, anything having to do with the interior, they couldn't get any push whatsoever. But I wouldn't characterize it as Lindsley getting tossed around. Definitely not. Do you think our running game will get better with Aaron Jones coming back? Nicholas, somewhat, yeah. I think he's the most natural runner of everybody they have back there. I think a lot of it has to do with the kind of defense they're playing, though, and the opponent. I don't think you're going to see much more movement next week. The Vikings have an incredibly stout line. You're not going to see, the Packers are not built to dominate up front in the run game. They're not a power mauling team. They're a zone team. They're a team that likes to get guys moving and then hit the cutback. And that's where Jones really is better than everybody else on the roster. But of course, the thing you love about Jamal Williams is his ability to keep Aaron Rodgers upright. And that came into play big time down the stretch yesterday. So I don't think Jones automatically leapfrogs anybody when he comes back, but he will be an extra weapon, so to speak. And I'd just like to say, as I'm talking about pass protection and running backs, Ty Montgomery had a few really nice blitz pickups last night. Very noticeable. And really good technique, really good job keeping Aaron Rodgers clean. That's very promising because we all know, anybody who's watched the Packers over the last few years and watched Montgomery and his struggles in pass protection, last night was very encouraging. Aren't you glad we didn't get Fuller? He's got hands like Ahmad Carroll. Kyle, I said, I think it was in my preview post, my preview and prediction post for the game, I never really quite understood the going after Fuller, other than maybe perhaps it was just to get them to spend more money on the guy. If that's the case, then it worked out masterfully. But I'm with you. I was never really kind of all in on that move, and I never really understood if it was truly a good faith attempt to try and acquire the player. I never really understood that because I think Fuller's fine. He's a serviceable NFL player, but I don't think he was worth trying to go get and disrupt your salary cap for. My thoughts on Balaga's play, Christopher, I talked about it a little bit before, but I thought he held up really well. I think there was some rust showing early. I think that's to be expected, coming off a big injury and not playing all preseason. But as the game wore on, I thought he got better and better. Yards after the catch, got to be insane, Matt. I agree. McCarthy kind of name-checked yards after the catch after the game last night. It was a big component in the offensive explosion in the second half. You saw what these guys can do with the ball in their hands, and hopefully that continues on throughout the year. I was at the game last night, and the crowd was amazing. Zach, I totally agree. You could hear it coming through on the television. That's not always the case when they're playing in Lambeau, but it was. You could see the energy. You could feel it, especially in the second half. No doubt about it. Why don't the Packers like to do quick passes like they did in the second half? It always works so well. Zachary, it is mystifying to me how McCarthy likes to call kind of a lot of the downfield stuff early on in the game. Now, that said, it is always a combination. It is always a combination of these long developing routes and Aaron Rodgers holding on to the ball. There were plenty of instances early on last night where he could have gotten rid of it quickly, and he chose not to, looking for something deeper, bigger downfield. It is very much a combination effort between McCarthy and Rodgers. It's not really ever just one or the other. But when they do go to that quick passing game, especially out of the pistol where Rodgers is forced to get out of his hands, they seem to acquit themselves quite well. And I'm with you. We saw that when they began to run the table 2 years ago. That all started on a Monday night in Philadelphia when they kind of forced themselves to get to the quick game. It really kind of was a spark plug for the offense. Maybe last night will remind them of that, but I don't know. It's a mystery. McCarthy seems to be pretty stubborn about it. Nick Perry looked decent for being out so long in training camp. I agree, Kyle. Another guy is probably trying to play himself into shape a little bit. As always, I thought he held the edge well. What's interesting to me is the big sack to end the game. That's a coverage sack. He's blocked initially. He disengages and is able to get around the corner only after Trubisky has to come off of his first couple reads. That's something I'm not so entirely sure you could say would have been there in years past. And I thought the secondary as a whole, as a group, played exceptionally well last night, especially as the evening wore on. Obviously, the Bears kind of emptied the playbook, so to speak, early on, especially in that first drive. A lot of unscouted stuff, a lot of misdirection, and the Packers took their best shot. But I thought as the evening went on, they got better and better, and the secondary especially really tightened up. And you really saw the talent level there come to the fore. Now, they're still going to take their lumps. They're still very young. It's going to be an up and down year, undoubtedly, especially with all the youth they have back there. But that's really promising, playing pretty darn well across the board week one. Now, some of that is Trubisky. He missed on a couple throws where guys were open. But for the most part, I thought the young corners held up really, really well. Thank you, Zach. Yeah. All the people who wanted Cobb traded are suspiciously quiet today. Show yourselves. Take your medicine. Should Jamal Williams have received more carries? I don't know about that, Kyle. I mean, he received quite a few up the middle that went nowhere. Maybe he should have received different kinds of carries, maybe some zone stretch or some counter stuff, but I could do without another trap play that goes nowhere. Reggie Gilbert had a huge play covering Cohen towards the end of the game. Any chance he takes some snaps from Clay or Ryan? You have to think so. After last night, you saw, pretty much what you saw all summer from Reggie. A lot of promise, a lot of hustle, and you saw a lot of Clay on the ground, out of position, missing tackles. I mean, last night was downright embarrassing for Clay Matthews, and the Packers cannot live with that. What they saw last night from their outside backer, if they get any more of that, they have to start playing Reggie over him. There's no two ways about it. Did you anticipate Kendricks getting as much work as he did? Not really. I mean, he played a bit of the move stuff, and obviously Rodgers hit him on that one shallow crosser that turned into a first down. But yeah, I thought we'd see more Mercedes Lewis, but I'm sure they like the matchup there. He's got a little bit more speed, a little more versatility. I think they seem to prefer that against Fangio's defense. What was up with Mike Daniels last night? He was all over the place. He was blocked on occasion, but he had a bunch of nice plays where he shed his initial block and was in the backfield. Now, he doesn't always make the tackle, but he can sometimes make the ball carrier change direction. He can sometimes basically get into the quarterback's lap and force a throwaway. Doesn't always show up on the stat sheet, but I thought Daniels played a strong game. Mo Wilkerson, however, I thought, I won't say it was concerning, but it was disconcerting. It was not the effort level and not the kind of explosion you want, or maybe you expected from a guy who has shown in the past he can be dominant, but a lot of times last night you saw the guy that the Jets were all too happy to get rid of. The Packers need more out of Wilkerson going forward. Quiet night from Jimmy Graham. Indeed, Lucas. I think they were using him to chip quite a little bit. Meant he couldn't get out into his routes as quickly. They certainly didn't feature him as much. We've seen this before where a tight end is, all the talk of camp and all the rage, and then they get into the regular season and they're just not featured a whole lot. That happened with Jared Cook early on. Even prior to his injury, I don't think he caught a pass until week 3 that year he signed, and that was against Detroit, and then he got hurt and then missed X number of weeks. Obviously, Martellus Bennett all hyped up last summer, and then we got into the regular season. We all know the drama there and the drops and the poor play. And I don't think Jimmy Graham's going to go down that road, but I just think in this offense, the wide receivers are always going to take precedence. They're never going to feed the tight end. Maybe they should, but that's never been their MO, no matter who they have playing the position. Thoughts on Kevin King? Lee, I thought he held up really well. I thought there were 1 or 2 plays where he clearly gave up what should have been a completion. There was one up the right sideline where he was beat, and Trubisky threw the ball out of bounds. There was another one in the red zone where he was so lucky. He got caught flat-footed, and again, Trubisky threw it out of the end zone. Should have been a touchdown. Those 2 plays in particular stuck out to me in regards to his poor plays, but down in, down out, looking at all the snaps, I thought he played pretty darn well. A very solid performance overall. Jordan Howard is a good back, made a lot of cutback runs. Trevor, no doubt. He made Clinton-Dix, Clay Matthews, a bunch of people look silly on occasion. There was one in particular on a second down where they had everybody flowing one way, and he cut out the back end, both Clay and I can't remember which safety it was, both flailing on the ground. Mike Daniels actually almost got him coming back from the defensive tackle spot. But yeah, Howard is a talent. There's no doubt about it. I think he finished 3rd in the NFC in yardage last year, so it's not like he was some paltry back there. Josh Jackson is going to be a good player. I really like the young corners in general. Kyle, I agree. Been talking about it all video. I think they are young. They're going to take their lumps, but you saw a lot of promise last night. Peter, that's funny. Jair Alexander played really great. One tough catch by Robinson. Yeah, and it was a perfect pass, like you say, and it was a contested catch. All you can ask is these guys compete and come back and have a short memory. I thought Jair did a great job. He's always going to have that issue. Teams are going to try and match up their bigger wide receivers, even if they're not burners, taller wide receivers to try and out-muscle, out-jump Jair because he is on the shorter side. And all you can ask is that he battles. And I thought he did that really well last night. Fred, that's interesting. Was disappointed last night with the defensive line. After watching today again, I was impressed. Made me wonder where the linebackers were. Thoughts? Fred, the linebackers were on the sideline. If you go back and you watch again, look how many times they ran 5, 6, even 7 defensive backs. They played Martinez, obviously, a whole heck of a lot, but outside of that, there weren't a lot of linebackers on the field for a lot of the time. Obviously, Clay and Nick and Reggie Gilbert got in there on the outside, but inside, it was mostly Martinez and a bunch of defensive backs. Seemed like when we went to no huddle, that was the turning point for the offense. It was part of it, Corey, definitely. Part of it was no huddle, part of it was going to the pistol, part of it was the short game. You put all that together, and they started cooking with gas in the second half. Mac was so invisible in the second half. He was. I mean, part of that, I think, is to be expected for a guy who missed all of camp, all of the entire offseason, really, and then was thrown in there, and I think probably played more snaps than the Bears would have preferred. But I do think Brian Bulaga, grew stronger as the game went on. And it's the old, we see this play out in the NFL a whole heck of a lot throughout the years. I think, to me, the most famous example, maybe in the Super Bowl a couple years ago when the Patriots came back against the Falcons. The Falcons were absolutely dominant early on in that game, which was one of the reasons they built such a big lead. Tom Brady just had no time early on in the game. But as the game wore on, the defensive front really just wore down and kind of ran out of gas. And I think you saw that with Khalil Mack last night. You saw a guy who was an absolute terror early in the game. He just wore down, and Brian Bulaga was steady as she goes. And, he got the better of him in the second half. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Do you think the 2 D lineman formation in the first drive was a bad decision? It's really impossible to say. These guys, Mike Pettin has access to more information than we will ever know. Plus, you throw in all the unscouted stuff from the Bears, not really knowing what to expect from Matt Nagy. It's hard for me to Monday morning quarterback any decision-making he may have had with personnel. He clearly thought that was the best way to go about it. He wanted to get certain personnel on the field. The Bears certainly drove down, and it was disheartening to say the least, but it's hard for me to go back and say that was a mistake without knowing what his kind of thought process was behind it. Not impressed with Big Mo. Preston, yeah, I just talked about it a little bit before. It was a disappointing performance from Wilkerson. There's no doubt about it. The Packers need more from him. Do you feel it would be better to sit Rodgers against the Vikings' strong defense, heal him up? No, Trey. If he can play, he should play. That's what he gets paid to do. He was just paid a bunch of money to play quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. You don't sit him because they're facing a strong defense. No. You go and you play, and you win the game. What did you think about the broadcast? Love Michaels Collinsworth and the Peter King interview. I tell you what, that Peter King interview with Bart Starr, when Bart Starr read the letter that he wrote to Aaron Rodgers, got real dusty in the Nagler house all of a sudden. That's all I'll say about that. Still need to clean up the poor tackling. George, I agree. There are many poor tacklers on the Packers. I don't think that will change as far as, when Clinton-Dix is throwing himself at somebody's feet, or, you got some Clay Matthews flailing at a guy in the backfield. That's going to happen. But I also think Kentrell Bryce played extremely well. He was a violent, sure tackler all night long. And I thought, Kevin King tackled well. We saw, even though he had some poor tackles, we saw Clinton-Dix make a big third down stop with a really sure tackle. I mean, I thought it was better than it's been in the past. Now, that's not saying a whole lot, but I thought it was, you saw some promise. Whereas in the past, I think you've seen nothing but despair and no hope. Do I have any Vic Ketchman stories? Do I? No, I don't have any Vic Ketchman stories, other than, Corey Behnke basically making fun of the guy for 2 years, to the point where when I first met Vic, we were very friendly. And then by the end of his tenure in Green Bay, he would basically ignore me because I work with Behnke. It's an ongoing theme in my life where Corey Behnke makes fun of people that I have to deal with, and then they hate me because of Behnke. Good times here at Cheesehead TV. Tune in for Packer Transplants on Wednesday night. All right, everybody, I'm going to have to jump. Thank you so much for all the questions. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to yours. Make sure you're checking Cheesehead TV for all the latest on the Packers. Obviously, they're off tomorrow. We won't probably have much of an injury update on Aaron Rodgers or anyone else until Wednesday, but that doesn't mean there ain't a lot to talk about and a lot to dissect. Cheeseheadtv.com. Make sure you're checking it for all your Packers needs. Thanks a lot, everybody. I'll talk to you tomorrow.